Blake from Hummingbird Tarot, and today I'm talking about decks in my tarot and oracle collection that have racial diversity in them. I recently got some gifts for my birthday. The Modern Witch tarot deck is one that I'd been considering for a while. I decided to go ahead and get that deck for myself for my birthday. I had some gift cards I wanted to use. One of the things that drew me to it was racial diversity. And one of the things I started thinking about, since all this conversation about race has really started to kind of be in the forefront of conversation these days, was that I hadn't really ever sought out. I just felt like I wanted more diversity in my tarot decks. So that kind of prompted me to go through, and I guess I should show you the back too. Probably a lot of you have seen this deck here. It prompted me to go through my tarot and oracle decks and just see what I had in my collection. I hadn't ever looked through my entire collection through that lens before, and I was really surprised because I had quite a few decks that had racial diversity in them. It occurred to me that it would be good to share this with everyone, to share those decks that I found, so you can decide if you want to expand your collection to include some of these decks. You can go ahead and make that choice. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you're notified every week when I upload a new video. Some of these decks, it's all a matter of perspective and how you're looking at them, and you'll have to decide what's right for you and what's not. Some of them definitely have more diversity than others, and some of them are kind of left for your own interpretation, so you can decide those, and I'll bring those up and point them out as I come across those. So I have a collection of tarot and oracle decks, and I thought I would just commingle them and share them with you. I do like using both tarot and oracle decks. Sometimes I use them alone, sometimes I use them mixed together. I'll have multiple tarot decks, multiple oracle decks. Sometimes I'll just have one tarot deck and one oracle deck together that I do, or I'll do a one card pull with just one deck, depending on what I'm doing, or I'll do a reading for someone with just one deck, oracle or tarot. Just depends on what's going on, what type of spread I'm doing, what type of energy I'm drawn to. So I thought we can go ahead and just get started. One of the first decks that surprised me that I hadn't really noticed before, what I did is I just went through all the decks in my collection, and I looked at ones, even though if I assumed already I don't think that one has much diversity in it, I looked at those decks through a new lens, and I was really surprised. And one of the ones that surprised me the most was the Everyday Tarot. And this is a deck that's by Bridget Esselmont, and the deck itself is a very small deck. It's like a poker size deck here. It's got really soft finish on it, and a nice finish with gold trimmed edges. But let me just take you through some of the cards that I found. And this is just a selection. This does include, I'm showing you the cards that I think of the white race when I look at them, and then black or other colors of races as well. I'm just showing you a selection of all the races that I see represented in the deck. So as I was going through this, you'll notice the skin color changes, and there's only 3 colors that are used in this deck. There's that dark purple color, and then there's this gold that's the same color that's on the outside, the gilding on the edges, and then the white color. But as you go through this deck, you'll see the skin color changes, and there's the gold skin color back to white, and then the darker purple color. And that hadn't ever stood out to me before. I just kind of assumed that this deck didn't have any diversity because it was just purple and gold and white, but I made it a point to sit down and look at all my decks, and I'm really glad I did, because this is not a deck that I would have originally considered a deck that had racial diversity in it. But looking at this deck through this new lens, it does actually seem to me. Now obviously you'll have to decide for yourself if that works for you or not, but I was surprised by that, and happily surprised. Another deck that I found are the Earth Magic Oracle cards. This is what the back of the deck looks like. It's Tree of Life. And these are just some of the cards. Now the majority of the cards in this deck are animals or just pictures of nature, but some of them there are different races that are depicted. So you'll see there's just a nature scene. So the majority of this deck are just pictures from nature, but there is diversity in the cards where race is depicted. Excuse me. There is diversity in the cards where human beings are depicted. The most popular version of tarot that's being read today is the Rider-Waite-Smith, and Pamela Coleman Smith is considered to have black heritage. And if you look at the majority of the Rider-Waite-Smith decks, they're said that the pentacles is meant to represent people of color, whatever that means. If they're talking about blacks, if they're talking about people with darker skin, olive complexion, whatever it is. I pulled the Universal Weight deck out with that in mind. I didn't see any difference in the races in this deck. However, I was pleasantly surprised when I pulled up the Radiant Wise Spirit deck that I have. And this is actually what caught my eye first. This person on the cover does have a little bit darker skin, and their hair looks a little different. And then again, what I tried to do is I went through this deck and just pulled what I thought was a representation. So I was really surprised, because that definitely doesn't look like your typical Rider-Waite-Smith image when you're looking at race. And this is something that I hadn't noticed in this deck before. But once I sat down and looked through this, and I had heard this deck mentioned in another video, but they hadn't shown the images, so I wanted to go look for myself. And I definitely see a lot more variety in the racial backgrounds of the individuals represented in this deck. So that was nice to see. So the next deck I want to look at, soul cards. And I would consider this deck, I mean, it's hard to tell what race the people are that are represented in here. It's very androgynous, and then some are very decidedly male or female. But as far as race goes, it's hard to tell. And some of it's just left for the interpretation, so you can decide who you think that looks like. Sorry, there's some glare here. And here's what the back of those cards look like. Almost like an acid wash jeans from the 1980s. That's what that reminds me of. So I thought I'd also include some decks that I have that represent a particular race or cultural tradition. One of the decks I wanted to talk about was the Native Spirit. And this is a deck that is based on Native American traditions. And these images are all based in nature, but it does give you some insight into Native American practices and tradition. And that's why I decided to include this one with my decks of diversity. There are no people depicted in this deck, but since it is based on Native American practices and tradition, I thought it would be a good one to include here. This is another one that's fairly popular, and that's the Light Seers Tarot. Again, just showing you a variety of the cards, the different races that I see depicted in this deck. This deck, the images, the artwork is just absolutely beautiful and stunning and very emotive. You definitely feel something when you're looking at the images here. And there's the back of the deck, and it didn't come this way. I colored the edges of each of the cards to match the colors found in each of the cards. So it's kind of a rainbow of colors on the outside edges. So another one I have here, this is an oracle deck, is the Everyday Witch Oracle deck. Here's what the back of these cards look like. And again, just grabbed a selection of the diversity that I saw in the deck. This is a really good companion to the Everyday Witch Tarot deck, which is one of my favorites. I find it very easy to read. It's both the Oracle deck and the tarot deck that comes with it. The tarot deck I didn't find much diversity in for Everyday Witch, so I didn't include that here. But I do find that both of those decks, the tarot and the oracle, are very easy to read. So here's another one. This is Magical Messages from the Fairies. These are oracle cards. Here's what the back of the deck looks like. And then again, a selection of the different races that I saw in here. This one is white-skinned people are a little more prevalent in this deck, but there's definitely some diversity in it. This one was a fun one. This is the Cook's Tarot. And if you're a foodie, you'll love this deck. There's the back of the tarot deck. And then here's some of the images from the deck. And this deck, again, is completely centered around food and family and community. And there is a nice wide variety of diversity represented here in this deck. Another oracle deck here. This is the Queen of the Moon Oracle. Here's the back of this deck. Sorry, the glare is terrible. Just don't have very good lighting today, so I had to use my ring lights here. Oh, a new deck to my collection is the Psychic Tarot Oracle, and you can use this as a tarot deck or an oracle deck. And this definitely has, here's the back of the cards. This definitely has a variety of races represented here as well. This deck, it has all the cards that you would find in a normal tarot deck except for the court cards have been taken out. And then there's a new, I guess I'd call it perhaps a new suit that goes over the different chakras that you can either pull out and do your readings without that, or throw that in there. And this has recently come to my collection. This deck haunted me for years, and I finally got it, and I'm super happy I did. It's a really powerful deck. Adds a different perspective to things than I've noticed before, which I really appreciate that. So now here's another oracle deck, the Sacred Traveler. The back of these cards is beautiful, and I actually colored those myself. They didn't come that way. And so here's some of the cards represented here. And you'll probably notice that I'm just taking a really small representation of each of these decks. It's a lot easier to handle rather than trying to have the whole entire deck there. This is an older deck. It's the Daughters of the Moon Tarot. This is primarily a female deck. Very strong feminine energy here. But lots of different racial diversity here. I find this deck actually hard to work with because it's round, and the easiest way to shuffle that round deck is to spread it all out and then scoop it back together, but it feels like the cards are kind of catching on each other and damaging each other a little bit. So I find that I actually don't use that deck very often. So here's another tarot deck, and this is the Vision Quest Tarot, and this again is a representation of Native American tradition. So there isn't diversity per se as it depicts one particular culture, but if you're looking to add to your diversity of decks that you have, this might be one that you might want to consider. I found this one to be really powerful. It does have keywords on most of the cards, so it can be good for a beginner to use. And this is definitely an older deck, the Witch's Tarot. If I remember correctly, this is from the 1980s. And some of these images, like the Hanged Man that's coming up, makes me smile a little. Muscular. The man with the gray beard is. But you can see there's some diversity in this deck as well. And this is what the back of that deck looks like. So as you can see, I actually had quite a few decks in my collection. I was really happy about that because I deliberately went out of my way to buy a deck that had racial diversity in it because I didn't think I had that much in my collection. And the truth is, I've never really, from time to time I'll be drawn to a tarot deck that has racial diversity in it that I'm looking for. I live in Southern California and I am more comfortable in an environment where there is the vast amount of cultural diversity that you do find in Southern California. We've got a wide variety of different cultures here, and I enjoy that, and I think it's more interesting. So I have deliberately bought some decks in the past because I was looking for more diversity and I appreciated what I was seeing, but I've never sat down and looked at all of my decks at once through that lens. So this was really enlightening, and I enjoyed this. And the thing I enjoyed the most was how many decks are out there that do have different cultures and racial diversity in them. So here's another deck that I have. This is a set, the Book of Shadows Tarot, and it has 2 decks, As Above and So Below. This first one, this is the As Above deck, and this deck doesn't have quite as much diversity in it as the So Below deck, which has a lot more in it. That's what the back of that deck looks like. This has the blue, and then the So Below has green on the back. And you'll see I have a lot more cards here in the So Below deck because there's a lot more diversity in that deck. So you can buy this deck, you can buy the decks individually, or you can buy it as a set that comes with both decks. I actually bought both decks because it came with a book, and I was hoping to get more explanation as to why they use these images, but the book really wasn't that helpful. It didn't have a whole lot of information. So if you're more drawn to one of these decks or the other, I actually recommend, rather than buying the set, which is fairly expensive, that you just buy the deck that you're drawn to. I didn't really find the book to this to be very helpful in giving me additional information. Yeah, I still have more. So this is Miss Cleo's deck, and she is a psychic that used to have a TV show, and there was some controversy around her, and I have she created a deck of tarot cards called the Tarot Power Deck, and they're Egyptian, and this is what the back of the deck looks like in the front. And I've got these upside down. I've actually pulled these out of the box because the box is kind of hokey, and I remember the controversy around her, and I kind of wanted to separate the cards for myself from that because I really appreciated the tarot deck and I wanted to be able to use those. So I've pulled them out of the box and I just have them in a bag. But there's Egyptian culture represented here, and I would say ancient Egypt is represented here. But I did find that some of the characters here do look black inside, and I think that's probably because they are Miss Cleo's cards, and she probably had some say in the cards that were chosen. So I wanted to include this one because of her. I have another oracle deck that is based on Native American traditions, and this one, some of the images in here, most of the images have animals in them, but there are some, and the ones that do have people in them, there is more diversity, because I'm finding that some of the people in this deck, first man, it looked like a black person, and then I'm seeing it looks like Asian features, and then also Native American features in here. And I could be wrong, but that's what I see when I look at this deck. There's the back of those cards. You'll have to decide for yourself if that works for you or not. So the next deck is the Spirit Within Tarot, and I actually bought these used, so I didn't get the box that came with it. I'll flash an image real fast on screen so you can see what the box looks like if you wish to buy these. And this deck has got silhouettes, and some of the features, you know, that could be a black man there. I don't know. It could be a white man too. It's hard to tell. So that's why I included this. You'll have to decide for yourself if that's enough racial diversity for you, if that works for you. But it seemed to me to have a nice selection of a bunch of different cultures that could possibly be represented here. Now, it is hard to tell what the race is of the people that are represented, but that's part of why I liked that, is you can't tell what race they're from. So that, I think, allows for a lot more diversity and for a lot more people to feel like they could identify with the energy of the people that are represented in this deck. Here's another Native American one, the Lakota Sweatlodge cards. And this is one of the decks that I've had the longest that's in my collection. This is from the 1990s. And that's what the back of the deck looks like. So this is based on the spiritual practices of the Sioux tribe. And most of the images in here, there are some images of people represented. You'll see that there. And then a lot of them are of animals in nature, or perhaps things happening with the weather or the seasons. So that's actually one that I recommend. I really like that deck. And then we have the Voyager Tarot. As with all of my videos that I make, I will have links to all of the items mentioned in this video in the description below, so you can just check that out, and I'll put them in the order that they are reviewed in this video. So the next deck I have, the Voyager Tarot. This is what the back of the deck looks like, and I've got blue that I added to the edges. And then, I'm so sorry, this one's got a lot of reflection too. This has a lot of different cultures represented in it. It is a collage deck, so there are some people that don't like that. I appreciate it because I feel like it gives you the opportunity to see lots of different things, and each time you look at the same card, you may see something different and different energy that pulls to you, and I really appreciate that about this deck. But as you can see from the variety of the cards that I'm sharing, that there are a lot of different cultures represented. I keep saying represented in this deck. Another deck I wanted to talk about, the Dreams of Gaia Tarot. And this one too, there's the back there. It's got beautiful gold gilding. These cards do, I think because of the gilding, tend to stick together, so I'm not a super huge fan of that, but I do like the amount of diversity in this deck. And some of the characters are very androgynous looking. You can't tell if they're male or female, what race they would be from. But as you can see, there's quite a wide variety of races represented here. Almost done. 2 more decks. So I also have the Sun and Moon Tarot. And this deck is really, it's the deck in the tin. It's small compared to a traditional tarot deck size. So you see here, there's a traditional tarot deck size. And then because the pictures are drawn so small here, I'll come up close, but I actually recommend, here's what the back of the deck looks like. If you do like this deck and you appreciate it and you want to get it, I would suggest getting it in the normal tarot size, because the images are so hard to see. The detail is so tiny. And there's a large void up high in a lot of the decks too. But you can see there's some diversity represented in this deck as well. And I really like this deck. But again, it's really small, hard to see. And then the last deck I wanted to share with you is the Neo Tarot. Here's what the back, this kind of reminds me of an Art Deco feel there. And then here's some of the images here. So thanks for coming with me on this journey. That's all the decks that I have to share with you today, and I know it's quite a bit. If you're still here, thanks for sticking it out and watching through the whole video. This was a fun video for me to make. I really enjoyed taking a look at my decks, some of the decks, seeing them for the very first time in that light, and it gives a new energy to these decks and makes me want to pull out some of these decks that I haven't seen in a while, and look at things from, looking at things from a different perspective can really add a lot to your readings. And I've been happy that a lot of people have been sharing their videos of decks that have diversity or Afro-centered decks that they have in their collection, and I've enjoyed watching those, and I just felt like I wanted to contribute to that story and participate in the conversation that's happening right now. I think it's an important conversation, and I'm happy to participate in that conversation, and hopefully the more we talk about this type of thing, the more we can work toward a solution for all of us that we're all happy with, we're all comfortable with. And I thank you for stopping by my channel. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you're here and you're not subscribed, please go ahead and take a moment and hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. And thanks for stopping by. I'll see you on the next one.